Good thing Patrick conveniently brought all of his journals with him. Hey everybody, welcome to Mainely Movies. As part of my coverage of the 2022 Toronto International Film Festival, today I'm going to be talking about the 2022 romantic drama, My Policeman, which will be released on Prime Video on November 4th. If you're new here, please consider subscribing for a variety of movie-related content like reviews, rank lists, and trailer reactions. All my reviews include a breakdown of the pros and cons, my rating, and some tailored film recommendations, so be sure to watch through to the end of this video for all of that extra content. My Policeman stars Harry Styles, David Dawson, and Emma Corrin, and was directed by Michael Grandage. Set primarily during the 1950s, it tells the story of policeman Tom Burgess, played by Harry Styles, who finds himself torn between schoolteacher Marion and museum curator Patrick. My Policeman was a story full of potential. Despite sporting a name that these days will probably drive more people away than entice, it had a promising premise. I should note up front that I have not read the novel that this film's based on, so I can't provide any comparison on that front, but I can provide some insight into the film as its own thing. As I said, this movie seemed like it had some potential, so I was happy to snag a ticket for the world premiere at TIFF. Of all of the screenings I went to at the festival, this one definitely had the youngest skewed crowd, even more so than the animated Wendell and Wild, which I watched right before it. That youthful audience might seem a bit strange for a romantic period melodrama, until you remember that it stars Harry Styles. The Styles fans were out in full force, and seemed to really enjoy the film, but the rest of the audience had very little reaction. Focusing on a love triangle in 1950s England, the story of My Policeman is okay. It has its moments of tenderness that any romance fan would enjoy, and the first half of the film is engaging enough, but things quickly fizzle out into excessive predictability. It utilizes all of the tropes one might expect in a movie like this, which I suppose, by the very nature of tropes, isn't surprising, but it is a bit disappointing. Because like I said, this story had potential. It's a general premise we've seen before, but the way it played out could have been something different. It hints at this potential throughout, occasionally touching on more profound concepts like the pain and damage caused by hiding one's true nature, but never really explores these ideas or its characters in any sort of meaningful way, which essentially just leaves us with a very surface-level romantic drama. Like the story, the three central characters are moderately engaging. At least their younger selves are. There's not much characterization to work with, but all three actors do their best, which admittedly gives us varying results. Of the three, Styles' performance is the weakest, but not one that I would characterize as poor. He just isn't able to dig into the character beyond what was written, which, as I mentioned, is a little underwhelmingly superficial. The only actor, and by extension character, who feels fleshed out beyond the page is David Dawson's Patrick. His pain and struggles feel emotionally genuine, but the screenplay never allows us to explore or experience these at the depths that are truly required. Although the younger versions of these characters mostly work, their older counterparts fall flat. In fact, if it wasn't for the names and cross-cut flashbacks, you couldn't blame someone for not realizing that they're even supposed to be the same people. They barely feel like the same characters, and certainly don't look the part. This brings me to the film's biggest problem: the structure. Although the decade-spanning nature of the story was one of the things that initially drew me to the film, I'm disappointed to report that it's the weakest and most unnecessary aspect. The bulk of the film is told via flashback, focusing on younger versions of the characters during the late 50s, but some of the film takes place in the late 90s with older versions of these characters. As with many things in this film, the potential was there. If the 90s portions of the film served as primarily bookends, with the journals used as a framing device at the beginning and end, it could have worked. But the story frequently cuts back and forth between these two time periods, halting the flow and momentum of the superior 50s portions, while adding nothing of substance with the 90s portions. it quickly becomes tedious. And although there is an attempt to make the 90s portion meaningful and relevant to the rest of the story, the ending is just extraordinarily rushed, both failing to generate its intended emotional response and failing to justify the film's clunky structure. Alright, let's talk about the pros and cons. The biggest pro has got to be the production design, specifically for the 50s portions of the film. It's not the best looking period piece I've ever seen, but those 50s set sections of the movie do evoke a very nostalgic quality that fit nicely with the story being told. The sets feel authentic, the costumes are fitting, the lighting's soft, and there's this overall visual quality that helps to make this a pleasant looking period piece. On the con side, the biggest issue is definitely the structure. This story is told across two different time periods, cutting back and forth between the 50s and the 90s. Unfortunately, I think this was a big mistake, because it disrupts the flow and pacing, especially when there's such a disconnect between the characters in the two time periods. They barely feel like the same characters, which is kind of distracting and pulls you out of the story. I mentioned before that I've never read the novel that this movie's based on, but in talking with other people at TIFF who have read it, it's my understanding that this cross-cutting structure isn't a carryover from the book, so I'm not really sure why they decided to go with that here. Honestly, I think a bookended style, in the vein of A League of Their Own, probably would have been just as effective and far less intrusive. Con number 2 is the screenplay. So the structure that I was talking about in con number 1 is obviously a component of the screenplay, but the general writing is lacking too. I don't know how much of this story is directly pulled from the book, so I can't speak to exactly where the writing fault lies here, but this film just provides such a surface level approach to the story. It's not a particularly unique story, so it really needed characterization or something to set it apart, but it ends up going for the most predictable trope-filled route possible. The frequently stilted dialogue and poor characterization make it hard for the actors to really connect with the material, which in turn makes it even harder for the audience to connect. Before I give you my rating and recommendations, I want to remind you that if you're interested in buying My Policeman or any of the other films I mentioned today, I do have affiliate links for all of them in the description below. I get a small commission from anything you buy using one of my links, so I'd really appreciate it if you'd use them if you're in the market for any of these movies. I'm gonna give My Policeman 2.5 out of 5 paws, bordering on 3. This film is a very middling affair. The 1950s sections are engaging with their familiar but okay story and characters, but the structure is distractingly clunky. It's a perfectly watchable movie, but not a particularly interesting or effective one. I would recommend My Policeman to fans of romantic melodramas or 1950s period pieces. This movie won't offer anything you probably haven't already seen before, but it'll at least be somewhat enjoyable to fans of the genre. Harry Styles fans seem to be very passionate, so if you like him, he's in this movie, but I'm not sure he'll be a huge draw for people who are otherwise unfamiliar with him. If you liked My Policeman, I would recommend Brokeback Mountain. This is another decades-spanning period piece romantic drama about a secretive gay relationship, and the emotional toll that that secret takes. If you want another 50s set period piece that explores the complications of a gay relationship at that time, you might want to check out Carol, which was also based on a book. And if you're interested in another similar period piece that takes a slightly less romantic approach, you should check out Professor Marston and the Wonder Women. This is a biographical drama about William Marston, the creator of Wonder Woman, and his relationship with his wife and their mutual girlfriend. Alright, a couple questions for you guys. Number 1, have you seen My Policeman? If so, what'd you think of it? And number 2, what's your favorite movie featuring young and old versions of the same characters? Be sure to leave your answers in the comments below so we can get a discussion going. Alright, so if you got some enjoyment, insight, or information on this review, I'd appreciate it if you'd hit that like button. And if you haven't done so already, please hit subscribe while you're at it to see more videos like this. Till next time, this has been Alyssa with Mainely Movies, the way life should be.